This is Your Anxiety Toolkit, episode number 160. Welcome to Your Anxiety Toolkit. I'm your host, Kimberly Quinlan. This podcast is fueled by three main goals. The first goal is to provide you with some extra tools to help you manage your anxiety. Second goal, to inspire you. Anxiety doesn't get to decide how you live your life. And number three, and I leave the best for last, is to provide you with one big, fat virtual hug. Because experiencing anxiety ain't easy. If that sounds good to you, let's go. Well, welcome back. It is OCD Awareness Week. And it's a week where I really love just getting out there and spreading information about OCD and about the treatment of OCD. And there's no better guest today than to have the guest we have, which is Dr. Jonathan Grayson. He's insisted that we call him John. And today I had a really fun, really great conversation with him about mostly topics that I have just been wanting to pick his brain on for quite some time. We talk about motivation in recovery. We talk about how to really help a person get ready and prepared for ERP. We talk about mindfulness. We talk about compassion. We talk about the really key points to keep somebody's mindset in the game for ERP. It was such a great episode. And as a clinician, I'm not going to lie, I learned a lot myself. And I really feel like I just love getting those, recaps and going over the main points and really bringing it home with all of that really good stuff that John likes to share with us. So thank you so much, Dr. Jonathan Grayson, for coming on. I am going to get straight to the show. In the meantime, though, please, everybody, go onto social media this week. We're going to do a ton of giveaways and some, Q&As and some maybe fun things that might be a bit of a surprise if you stick around. Go onto social media. We would love to see you there on Instagram or on the Facebook group. We've got a few exciting things coming up for you. All right, let's get to the show. Well, welcome. I have a very special guest, one that I am actually secretly geeked out to share with everybody. I have Dr. Jonathan Grayson here with us. Thank you so much for being here.
It is my pleasure. You are, just to make sure during this interview, you are going to call me John, right?
Yes, we made the deal.
Okay. All right. Just checking.
And so, John, as I sat down and I've read your book and everybody loves the work that you've done. I really was reflecting on what I wanted to know. And as a clinician, I have to ask this question first. This is actually for me. It's less of a question that the followers and listeners have asked is, when you are with a client and you're sharing and trying to have them understand what's happening in their brain, when they've been either newly diagnosed with OCD or they're coming for treatment for the first time, how do you explain the mechanism and the way in which OCD plays out in somebody's brain? Or, do you use a metaphor? Can you share with me how you would explain that?
I will do that. You've actually heard it numerous times and you've read it because I will at some point when I'm talking to them, I'll ask them, what do they think is the core of OCD? Which invariably will lead us to say it's uncertainty. And, I'll point out that, part of the problem is that they're trying to be absolutely certain, and research has shown us that the only people who are certain are stupid. So we're not going to be able to help them do that. I will ask if their spouse, son, or child is alive. They'll say yes, and of course it's like, how do you know? Because they're not with you. I usually, and I think this is probably true of you, I do have a belief about you, if I could share it.
Yes.
Publicly.
Of course.
I believe that you don't want to be maimed, paralyzed, or disfigured.
Yes. I'd like that. That would be very nice. No, I would like not to be.
Oh, right. And before COVID-19, how'd you get to work?
I used to drive.
Right. So you would risk death to go to work. You risk death to see a movie. You never say, there will not be a crash today. You hope there's not a crash today, and your brilliant plan is, I'm not going to deal with it until I'm bleeding out, crushed under the metal.
Right.
So our goal in treatment is to learn to live with uncertainty the same way they live with all the uncertainties of the rest of their life. And I think that is the key to treatment. So I basically really won't let somebody do exposure until we've gotten to that point. Because you think about it, if I have somebody who's afraid, let's say they have contamination, is afraid their kids are going to die. And if we ask them, are they definitely going to die? They might even agree that probably they won't. I can't, and I don't know. Do you have kids?
I do.
Oh,
Two.
this is great. So I have a question. Imagine I have a gun with 1,000 chambers, okay? And there's only a bullet in one of them. And for the 999 chambers that are empty, if that's what goes off, I'm going to give you $20 million. And the gun, of course, is aimed at your kid. So you have a 1 in 1,000 chance of your kid getting shot and 999 chances to win 20 mil. Are you going to do that?
It's a good question. What do your clients usually say?
This is a new question. What does Kimberly say? You're the first to answer it live.
I'm not going to.
Okay, now.
But that's because I'm not interested in $1 million.
I made it 20. Let's just make it 10,000 chambers.
Yeah.
One chance in 10,000. Are you going to risk your kid's life?
No.
Okay, so think about it. A client comes to us and they have a fear that something terrible is happening and it might happen. And we're saying, oh, just do this. So the question that many therapists fail to ask or fail to help them with, the key question is, why would you take this risk?
Yeah.
So, and the thing is that therapists often want to just kind of explain it, well, it's not likely. Okay, but hey, you don't want to risk your kid's life, 1 in 10,000, that's like pretty good odds of survival, and you're not willing to take it. So what's going to make that okay for them? Until they can answer that question, because let's face it, I'm going to do this thing. Yes, great. I'm going to get over my OCD, but but this might actually happen. So why am I going to take this risk? And I think for every presentation of OCD, there is like a sort of different set of answers, which is, really designing exposure response prevention. It takes some talent, but it's really not the hard part of treatment. This is the key to treatment.
Yeah.
And I think the reasons tend to break into 3 general areas, but this is oversimplified. Okay. 1, what have you lost to OCD? And there's some form I have. This is, you can download all the forms I have on a website called freedomfromocd.com. Don't know where I got that name from, but they're all downloadable for free. There's a ERP motivators. One set of forms is, what have I lost OCD? One set of forms is, what have I, how have I hurt my family? Yeah. So I want people to write down the most painful, awful experiences they've had with their OCD. Because when we're comparing the risk of their OCD to whatever it is, I want them to remember what they've actually lost. We have the potential damage that might happen to your child, and we have the real damage your OCD is going to cause.
Yeah.
I do like asking moms, would you do anything for your children? They will always say yes, and I will tell them gently they're liars. Because what have they done with their OCD, and how many times have they made their kid late or yelled at their kid for not doing something OCD, and the whole list. So that's often a really good counter comparison that makes the risk seem worthwhile. Yeah. Because we have the definite damage you're going to do your child. Or if your child has OCD, do you want them to be like you, or do you want them to be able to cope with it? A second category, what do you hope to do with your life if you're free? And the third critical category, this is kind of a double. I can't decide if it's 1 or 2. It's a variation of, it's not like you have a choice and your rituals don't work anyway.
Right.
If you have contamination, it's not like you can protect your child. If I'm worried I'm going to slice and dice my wife tonight, well, going crazy is not something you plan. So Kathy just has to hope I don't go crazy tonight.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing I can do. So, you know, you don't really have a choice. For all the effort you put in, your feared consequence might happen anyway. I think often if we're talking about it, or if I'm giving a specific example about it, sometimes it sounds easy because, I'll talk about this one key thing that helped flip the person.
Mm-hmm.
But some people it takes 2 sessions, some people it takes 3 months. So I
Yeah.
consider that a really, and what I find really incredibly disturbing, most therapists don't know this step. Most therapists, it's like, oh, we're going to have them contaminate their hands. It's like, now thinking about ERP, it's so powerful, even if you do it kind of sloppily, it works most of the time, but there are clients where they need more finesse. So this question of why would I take this risk is critical.
Yep.
And it's going to form, when I do these scripts, I'm either recorder to have them record or write it. And it's going to basically be a version of those 3 questions I said, kind of over 10 minutes, including then and if I do take this risk, X might happen where we go through all the horrible nightmares that they may have to live with, and which I just said this one additional thing, how will you attempt to cope with it positively?
And I love that you add that question. I mean, I was going to ask you that a little bit later. You're hitting all my spots that I was going to ask you. I love it because these are the things I feel like your message is really so powerful, because I think that's a component that I often hear is missed in ERP, which is like, okay, if it does happen, let's actually work through that, right? Like what will that look like?
Because when we start with some forms of OCD, the consequence is possible.
Mm-hmm.
That is, you might get cancer.
Right. Or
Do you
go to
want your
jail
last
for a year.
Yeah, well, I'm picking the more obvious. Cancer's like death, death of a family member. There are a bunch of things. Your house might burn down. There are a bunch of things that would happen. And I think when a disaster happens, particularly if it's the loss of somebody, we all imagine it in the sense of like this phone call. That is, you get this message and everything stops.
Yeah.
And that's where people like, okay, I don't want to imagine anymore. But in the real world, something happens. The doc says, I'll say to somebody, so, okay, let's say you go to the doctor, and he says, I think you need a biopsy for cancer. What are you going to do? And it's like, I'm going to freak out. Okay, what's that look like? I'm going to scream and yell in the doctor's office. Yeah, okay. So how long are you going to do that? Do you ever get home? Yeah. You eating dinner tonight? Are you going to bed tonight? Are you going to get up tomorrow? What are you going to do tomorrow? Like sooner or later, you start living again. Something actually really happens, even if it's something we don't want to think about. And even for something horrible like, do I slice and dice Kathy tonight? Right? One of 2 things is true. Either I've gone crazy, and the next morning, I wake up, and if I recover my senses, all right, we're going to have to put me in jail.
Right.
I'm going to feel horrible, obviously. This will always feel horrible. At some point, I kind of have to forgive myself because it wasn't me. And I'll just have to figure out how to make a better life for myself in prison. Or I wake up the next morning and I'm still bonkers, so my first job is try to escape. And if they catch me, make a good life for myself in prison, but I won't have any guilt.
Right.
But whatever it is, how will I attempt to cope with it? And the reason I don't want people to say, well, I would kill myself, because they might feel that. But that's an avoidance in a way of trying to not actually deal with moving on to the next step. Yeah. So part of the reason I want it to be this positive coping isn't just to make it like some people say, wasn't it reassuring? It's like, well, I don't know, their kid is dead. This isn't really reassuring. You're going to die in 5 years. What's the reassuring of you're making the best of it?
Right.
It's like, how would you attempt to cope? Because I think coping with uncertainty boils down to, if disasters happens, I will try to cope with it.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I will. I mean, I don't know if I can cope with horrible things. I just hope I can. Right. I like to think that thinking about it makes it a little more likely.
Right. And well, I also feel, not that it's so related, but I feel that there's a degree of that as you share your coping strategy, there's a visualization there of oh, yeah, that's how it would happen, instead of just avoiding it completely, and shutting it completely down. That visualization helps you work through, and is the exposure.
Yes, it's a subtle exposure. Sometimes if I'm asking somebody early on, well, what if you have this cancer? We take them through the first couple of weeks. But right, it's not like it gives them, like, oh, great, I'm dying of cancer, but it is they actually kind of comforting because it's like, oh, all right, there are things I would do.
Right, right. Why do you think some people have more uncertainty than others?
Are you asking this with regard to why do some people with OCD seem to have a greater difficulty than others, or asking why do some people have OCD and others not? Like, what are you asking, Kimberly? I'm
Yeah.
really uncertain.
Either. I mean, I think I'm just sort of asking the most common questions that I would get asked, which is like, why? Okay, if uncertainty is a part of the world, the way I always explain to it is like uncertainty is in every day for every person, right?
Mm-hmm.
For some of us, myself included, the uncertainty alarm goes off a lot, right? So why do you think that is?
I think when we're talking, we're talking about a diagnosable disorder, we're talking OCD or GAD, because I think of GAD as OCD light. I do think there's a biological component, but there's obviously a learned component because the person doesn't have trouble with every possible uncertainty there is. It's and I'll come back to this probably, but it's in a certain limited area. I mean, even as pervasive, it's still not everything. Now, I think many people with OCD have this illusion that the non-sufferers are way better. I honestly, dead seriously believe that the average person does not cope that well with uncertainty. Better than somebody in the midst of their OCD, but not really that well. I think if we, artificially break the world down into like I'm not coping with uncertainty or I'm in denial or I'm, coping really well, I think it's a really small group coping well.
Yeah.
So I say dead seriously to anybody I'm working with, you're not going to be normal after treatment. You will be better than normal. I think OCD puts the sufferer in the position before treatment like it's heaven or hell. You cope with it or you don't cope with it and you're in hell. Denial is not something they can do that well.
Right.
And I think we saw that with COVID-19 because I found that, me and a bunch of people, like yourself probably found that the people who have done well in treatment, they were doing better than their families. It was like, this is
Yep.
weird. Like they're crazier than me because that was what the average person actually does.
Right. It's funny you say that because I was just about to say the same thing is when COVID started, I had a client who clapped and went, I have been preparing for this for years. Like, this is where all my work is going to pay off because it's right.
Exactly.
They had all
Yeah,
this
yeah.
training and being uncertain.
Right. One of our clients, when at a group, he said, like, I'm watching all these people and I'm watching all the flaws in the ritual. I feel like I should hire myself out to tell them how to, properly ritualize for COVID-19.
Right.
Because I know how to ritualize way better than they do.
Right. It's true. It really, really,
Yeah.
I love that you said that. So I think that you're right. I like that approach of they handle uncertainty once they've been through treatment better than the average human being.
Yeah. Because again, uncertainty, although I think it's the core of OCD, it is like an incredibly major human problem.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't do very well with it.
Right. So you've kind of touched on this. Would you share with me, you've talked a lot about getting someone to do ERP and that they do have to understand these core foundational things before concepts, before just
Well, they
throwing
have to
themselves.
agree with them.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to decide. Okay, I want to do this.
Yeah. Do you find that that is motivation enough, or are there times where I'll give an example. Is even today, I have a client who's usually pretty consistent, and then there will be the odd day where they're like, "No, not today, not today." You know what I mean? So in that situation, would you return back to these worksheets that you have, or how do you approach motivation?
There's a little bit of worksheet. I'm not a heavy worksheet person.
Okay.
So,
Oh, I'm a worksheet girl.
yeah. So I'm not a heavy worksheet person,
Okay.
but I will have them return. We will return to the line of thinking that kind of got them moving there. In the worst case scenario, I pull out the ultimate motivator that never fails, which, it reflects my Philadelphia roots. And it has never been known to fail. Which I guess you might want to hear the secret.
Oh, I'm literally like ready for it. Come on, let's see it. Yes.
And we will not turn it off until they do it.
I actually love that. That is brilliant. That's one I have not heard from you.
Yeah, I don't think I've often pulled that out of talks, but yes, that's the
I love it.
considered the ultimate motivator in the universe.
I can see it's funny because I've told this story to my people hear this all the time is there is a particular, it's a rap song that no matter what, it can get me to do a hard thing no matter what. So I think it is a matter of finding your jam and really going to it, but you can't go wrong with that, can you?
Yes.
I like it. How many times have you had to employ?
Countless.
Oh, really?
Yes, I don't know if everybody who's seen me has heard. I don't think everybody's heard it, but some people just at the threat of me playing it was like, "Don't do that again." Okay. Fine, I'll do it.
Right. Now, is there a piece of that? I'm being a little geeky here, but is there a piece of that? Is it the humor that gets people going? Or do you think there is a visual association with that being, a song of bravery and courage and so forth? Like, what is it about that you think gets people going?
I think it's multiple things. I mean, there is some association to that. I think there's obviously the humor in it.
Yeah.
If I've done it right, I've guessed that I can help the person do this. So it's kind of like, well, we know this is going to happen sooner or later.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a combination of things,
Right.
I think partially it's I've made, and obviously I don't always guess right, but I've guessed that I think the person can do whatever this X is that I've decided to push on. Maybe a little thing, it might be a big thing, but I have some intuitive feeling that's often right, but not always.
Right. I love it. I do. I try to learn one thing a day, and that's the thing I needed to learn today. That's it right there. I love it.
You'll have to download that for your cell phone.
I will. Actually, yeah, I definitely will. I have it on backup every time. That's good. It particularly even works effectively over online therapy. That would be very effective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I love it. Okay. Your gun technique, is this what you would call your gun test that you talk about in your book?
Is what?
The gun test that you shared before. Is the example you used before your very famous gun test? Oh, no,
that wasn't the gun test. That was for any therapist listening who's feeling like they should take the risk because you should live with uncertainty. And I always like to point out, try to understand what it is for the sufferer. It's not like just like this theoretical thing. It's like, this is real. So I'm always disturbed. I think empathy is not as much a therapist trait as one would wish it to be. Mm. If somebody's talking to me and they're telling me how they're suffering, I have to imagine that those are the rules of living. Mm-hmm. And then I have to try to imagine living like that so if I can reflect back on what's happening. If I just start answering what's wrong with their thinking, I'm not listening to them.
Yeah.
So that becomes kind of critical. I forgot what I'm answering. The gun test. So that was really for kind of a little bit of for empathy. I think when I made it up, I wasn't really thinking of it being like a thing. The gun test is, you're afraid X will happen. And often sufferers will describe how they feel. And so how they feel is like, it'll definitely happen, or I don't know if it will. I'm pretty sure it will happen. And so I'm kind of establishing, okay, we're putting your child's life on the line. We're going to do this. And, you have to guess. And, if you make the right guess, your kid lives. If not, he dies. What's your guess? Mm. And most of the time, there are exceptions. Most of the time, the person will make the normative guess, so they don't have the same faith as a non-sufferer. Right. But it gives me an idea that that the OC is driving them. Sometimes a person will be, yes, it will happen. So that will slightly alter how we're going to approach that. Because now it's like we're approaching. Because now we've moved from maybe it's going to happen to no, I think this will happen. Right. Which goes back to, so why am I going to take this risk?
Right.
What's the magic question that kind of break apart that system?
Right.
I was just going to say one thing. It is not for so this is just an obsession. It's not a reassurance thing. It's.
The reason I brought it up is you'd already brought up the gun, and I wanted to differentiate between the two. Is I have a group of clinicians who I'm on a text chain with, and I said, I'm interviewing John Grayson today. What's the one thing we have to talk about? And multiple people were like, the gun test, the gun test. And so
What
I
do they want
wanted
to know about the gun test?
well, I think it's just to share that, because I remember at the beginning, this is where I feel it is so powerful. I remember at the beginning of COVID on Instagram, a really wonderful advocate in the OCD community who had health anxiety shared how she was convinced she had COVID, and she'd driven down to the hospital, and she was in the parking lot, and she knew she had to make a decision whether she was going to go in to get a test for reassurance or whether she was going to willingly tolerate her own, uncertainty. And she said, I walked through the gun test. I said to myself, if I had to pull a gun to my head and make a decision on whether this is, a part of me needing certainty, right, or if this is me actually having COVID symptoms, what would I choose? And she said, I sat there for like 30 seconds. I metaphorically pulled the trigger and I drove home. So powerful, such a powerful story, given how anxiety provoking those first few months of COVID were. Right. So I wanted you to share that. And anything else, if you want to share anything else beyond my story, to sort of, pack a punch with how powerful that is.
I'm just going to leave it with you. Yes, yeah. I mean, it's nice that I'm going to live with the uncertainty, but because of that, I'm going to take the risk.
Yeah, right. It's such a powerful decision-making tool, right? It's not her saying, no, it's not, and I'm going to give myself reassurance. It was saying, are you going to go through with this compulsion or not? Like, make a decision on how you want to respond.
Yeah, it was great for her. That was wonderful.
Yeah. Is that how you explain it?
I'm trying to think, what do I do? I am not sure that I have used it as a reason like, well, since would make the guess this way, do the exposure. I don't know that I've actually done that.
Interesting. I'm glad I told the story.
Yeah. So I know I pull it out periodically, but I'm having trouble like, and why do I mention this thing? So I'm mystified. I'm going to have to listen to myself now.
Well, it's in your book. I actually think I
know
that.
It's
in your book. So people can refer there to your book, and I think there. But I just loved, and I'm actually, the reason I'm going down this direction is the next question I want to ask is probably the most common question I get asked. I use social media a lot, and I often receive like panicked DMs from 3 a.m. I don't respond to personal questions on social media, but the most common are, how can I just stop myself from doing compulsions? Like, I'm stuck, right? Like, how can I intervene at some point, or what can I do? I'm really curious to hear how you would respond to this really common question.
You've already responded to it, because I might be good, but somebody panicking in the morning, stuck in a set of compulsions, who very well hasn't really been treated. And I might take a couple of weeks to convince somebody that they need to do treatment. So if I was that good, I would be so amazing. It's like, on the face of that call, fix it. So, if I were, I wouldn't pick up the phone for that. But if I were answering something, in print, I'm going to answer in a kind of general way about exposure. And I'm going to have to acknowledge this might not help you now. This is ultimately where, here's what you're trying to avoid. So I might write a few paragraphs about uncertainty and ultimately what they're going to have to do. But, I understand that, they're not ready right now. And I'm sorry that I hate to admit we're not miracle workers.
Yeah. So I think that the question would be, and so let's even take it. So let's even say for someone who is midway through treatment or in the early stages of ERP work, is what tools do you encourage people to embrace in the how to be uncertain?
Everything is so individual.
Yeah.
And I think there are like 2.5 answers to that question. One has to do with their form of OCD and what it means to be uncertain and what they have to live with. It's quite different if it's scrupulosity versus contamination. So the kind of things we'll have talked about will be very different. So part of the how is, and accepting this really terrible fact that logic doesn't change feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Logic gives you a reason to not do what the feelings tell you, but you're still stuck with them. And I think depending on the preparation, some people find it easier or harder to accept the potential consequences. I think during treatment, people forget. It's easier during a planned exposure. They're in the right mindset. When something comes up by surprise, they're less likely to be in the right mindset. So one reason we want people to listen to scripts constantly is, they'll memorize the script pretty quickly, but they're not thinking. But I want them to play it all the times to raise the odds that when they're in the fearful situation, it starts to jump down the rabbit hole. It's like, wait, all that stuff that he said, right, okay, I have to do that. And I think for some people, again, what are the things they're afraid of? For some people, their own reaction is as much a feared consequence as what they fear. So there's a group of people, everybody with OCD is obviously really anxious, but one group, the anxiety they're feeling is equally a consequence as people are going to die from contamination. Under those circumstances, then I will work on, what I call mindfulness. Mindfulness has so many definitions. So many people kind of associate with being in the Zen happy land. And I don't. I generally think of it as you don't have to make a situation that's difficult worse.
Yes.
When we start working with you with mindfulness, you're in kindergarten.
Right.
That is, if you had to learn to read right now, it would be terrible.
Right.
Because, you can say, see Jane run, barely, and being you have this mind to do really complicated books. Later, you get the benefit. So initially, if I play this example for people, it's like, oh, okay, you're not talking about somehow I've crushed it down when I'm paying more attention to my physical sensations. Like, oh, that's what you mean? Because a lot of people say, I can't do it, doesn't work. It's like, oh yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
Keep coming back to my body. And, through that, we're gradually, having them, basically in a way exposed to the internal sensations.
Yeah.
But we're starting on something easy, just their physical sensations. Later, we're going to focus on your anxiety. Later, so we're going to do two things with it, right? We're going to have you be anxious and actually still do things. We're also going to have you be anxious and focus on that anxiety at different points in time. So not that it feels good, because anxiety and panic attacks are really difficult, but we want to turn into really crappy feelings as opposed to panic.
Yeah.
And that's part of why we're going to focus on that. So, if I think that that's a major component, that will be a piece of the treatment. I really like that particular example just because, again, and the words just always sound easy, And again, I find it frustrating if somebody sees me and they were told by a therapist, just sit with your feelings, and they did nothing.
Right.
They didn't breathe, they just did nothing, or they kind of did the whole breathing thing with the idea that you should get calm and, trying to make them calm. So, by the way, in case you need that, as long as we're selling you music today, Trip Like I Do by Crystal Method.
Oh, you'll have to send me. What did you say?
The song is Trip Like I Do by Crystal Method.
Awesome. I'll put it in the link.
That's not in the email. I'll tell you why the song has special meaning to me. But anyway.
I love this. I'm curious because, and this is where I'm just going to bounce around. So for me, when I'm with someone, I'll say, I want you to sort of drop down into whatever the experience is, and that sort of sit with the feeling. You're obviously a really compassionate person, and I'll make this the last question. You're obviously a very compassionate, empathic person. Do you implement their creating their own self-compassion practice in that sitting with the uncertainty, or is that something that isn't a part of the work that you do?
I don't know. I don't necessarily incorporate the way the order in which you're throwing it in. No, but I will talk a lot about self-compassion and trying to find what is the inroad that will get them to imagine it, right? Because they're easy words to say.
Yeah.
So whatever image will help them break through to imagine it. Right. I was talking to one client the other day, and who's very hard and judgmental towards herself. And we were talking, and I said, like, imagine this, when you at 10 years old, and being really scared because you had your OCD that long. Like, can you see her?
Yeah.
Do you want to yell at her? Like, what do you want to do with her? Now, for her, that image, that meant something to her.
Yeah.
Like, that was enough of an image. Like, she could envision taking care of her. And so for her, that was like the pathway into self-compassion. But that was her pathway. It's not like, oh, I can do that with everybody. Look at yourself as a little kid and do that. For a lot of people, that's meaningless. So,
Right.
It's like, what is going to touch them or help break apart the system? Because, underlying the self-compassion question is a secondary question of, like, why do you have to be so hard on yourself?
Yeah.
Which is often it's another issue, because again, I can't be self-compassionate if I have what I feel are good reasons to dump on myself. So
Right.
how, again, are we going to take that system that they have and break it?
Yeah.
In a nice way, but like we want to destroy that system. So
Right.
that part isn't viewing this little girl inside her. That's coming up with some set of reasoning that's going to suddenly make them question these assumptions. And again, whenever I'm talking about reasoning, and even when I'm, in some sense, I'm doing a very Socratic method. However, it can't be a system of, it is logical, but it can't just be logic. It has to be something that's emotional also.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not touching them. It's got to be not like, yeah, this logically makes sense, because honestly, I can make anything sound logical. but I used to do that in high school. That was something I practiced, making logic sound like it was sensible, for real. But to make something where it's like, oh my God, that's me.
Yeah.
So that's what the job is. How do I address that for the person? So they have a reason to go, like, okay, maybe the system I have where I'm dumping on myself is wrong. Yeah. Maybe.
Right. I love it. I could go on and on, but I'm going to be respectful of your time. Is there anything you feel like you want to add that that you feel is appropriate to add at the end? This is coming out in OCD week, so OCD Awareness Week, or you feel like we hit all the spots?
I think you may know me this well. I'm never done. You may have to respect your time and your viewers. If you like now or some other time, we can talk about acceptance.
Yes.
And, so I'll leave that in your hands, Kimberly.
Well, can we actually do a whole thing on that? Because I think that's a whole 30 minutes. I don't want to skim you on that, because I feel like you have some great stuff to say there.
Maybe. Yeah,
it's your favorite?
Minutes, that'll be a challenge. No, I don't know. I don't know. 30 minutes. Do I have 30 minutes? Well, we'll find out,
Yeah.
It feels like you have enough questions. So, if I run out of things, you'll just ask me some other questions I can go off on.
If you have all of the answers, I have all the questions. We're going to be perfect for each other.
Sounds great.
Let's definitely do acceptance, because I feel like that is key, and we can schedule that right away. Where can people hear more about you, grab your stuff, tell us everything?
My book has almost my entire repertoire except for 40 minutes. It's almost scary if somebody reads my book, because I know I have this kind of fear, like they're going to say, oh yeah, I read that. Oh yeah, I read that. But apparently it's different hearing it, so they don't mind hearing it even if they've read it. I'm on a bunches of podcasts. There's the OCD stories. Mm-hmm. I don't know where else I am. I'm kind of in a bunch of places. I should keep track, shouldn't I?
And your therapist website, if someone wants to seek out treatment?
LAOCDtreatment.com. Mm-hmm. You're taking such good care of me.
I am.
It's like, oh yeah, I should do that too, shouldn't I?
Yeah. I'll have links to all of this in the show notes so that people can directly go there. Yeah. You can see how geeked out I am. I just love hearing perspectives and different approaches. And I feel like you kind of perfectly marry concepts and compassion together. I feel like it's very, very cool. I think it's really, really cool. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on.
It is my pleasure. Till we meet again.
Please
note that this podcast or any other resources from cbtschool.com should not replace professional mental health care. If you feel you would benefit, please reach out to a provider in your area. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for supporting cbtschool.com.